Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are continuing with our quick build series, where we'll be creating a briefly summarized character build for D&D 5e. And as always with our quick build, if there's ever a build you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The request for today's video comes from Johnny Boy, who wanted to see an Artificer, Rogue, Assassin build for a Warforged. They also requested to try and see if Spider Climb could fit into the build, which we of course can try to pick up, since it is part of the Artificer's spell list. Now before we start the build, there is one thing about this concept that makes it pretty intriguing for me personally. I actually did toy around with the idea of this type of build, a Warforged Artificer Rogue, as a backup character for a campaign a few years back. This was around the time when I believe the Armorer was in Unearthed Arcana, but the Artificer was an official class thanks to Eberron. And the idea I had for the character then was one called the Infiltrator, or INFLTR8R, if you wanted to get all robotic and thematic about it. The idea of the build was to get as high of a Thieves' Tools lock-picking / trap disarming score that we could possibly get. That way, as an infiltrator, they'd be able to get in absolutely anywhere. Then, of course, they could use their rogue shenanigans to try and be stealthy and get away if they did end up getting caught wherever they were. They were designed specifically with a heist sort of orientation in mind, not combat or anything like that, simply because of what the campaign setting was. Now before I get too lost on tangents talking about the character and the campaign world and all that stuff from back in the day, I will say that I never actually got to play the character, but the combo did get pretty nuts, at least on paper. And it's because of the fact that Artificer and Rogue synergize well together, but also there was a little bit of Unearthed Arcana thrown in. The combo used to be, you would add your dexterity, obviously, plus proficiency to a Thieves' Tools check, plus we'd get expertise, either through being an Artificer or a Rogue. Then we would add Gloves of Thievery, which we get to make just as one of our infusions from being an Artificer. Plus we would get the Unearthed Arcana infusion of Armor of Tools. Now what this did is you would integrate a tool set into your actual armor, and you would gain your intelligence bonus to that tool. Plus, because we could get enhanced ability from just being an Artificer, we could have Cat's Grace to just have flat advantage. That means that at level 10, once all the moving parts kind of really come together, because it does take a while to get absolutely everything for this build, but still, once we had it all, it was a plus 18 with advantage on a lockpicking attempt. Now, of course, the skeleton, or actually meat of that combo, is still here. It's just that we miss out on the potatoes that was the Armor of Tools infusion. By using the official rules, we can still keep pretty much every other bonus that we have, though, and we actually do technically have Flash of Genius to pick up eventually if we wanted to still add our intelligence bonus to a Thieves' Tools skill check. Though that's not going to be the best use for it, obviously, and it would really only be in the event that we needed to pick a door or disarm a trap that had like a DC of 30 or higher. Very rare cases, but still funny to be able to do that. So now that we know some of the background about the bare bones of this character, what can we actually add to them to make them feel like an assassin and not just a really good safecracker? Starting our build and character creation, this is actually a pretty straightforward build. We're going to be a Warforged. We are going to use the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything optional rules to swap our ability score +1 and +2s around to be distributed into the ability scores that we want. Though it's not the end of the world if you did just keep the +2 to Constitution, because you still get a free +1 somewhere else. With that in mind, we're going to wind up with the following stats. We're going to dump Strength, leaving it alone with no points to keep it at 8. We're then going to put 9 points and our +1 into Dexterity to push it up to 16. We're going to put 7 points into Constitution to make it 14. We're going to put 7 points into Intelligence as well, but add our +2 there to make it 16. And then we're going to put 2 points into Wisdom and Charisma to make them both 10. And here's where I'm immediately going to contradict myself. That last part on the wisdom and charisma is actually just a placeholder for the purposes of this video. If you were seriously going to play this type of character, what I would actually recommend doing is picking either wisdom or charisma to specialize in as your backup skill set. Instead of getting a +0 to each of them, you could have a +1 to one of them, and while that's not great, it's still mathematically better. And then when we're picking our skill proficiencies, you would want to pick up, obviously, the things like sleight of hand, stealth, acrobatics first, but then pick the skills that are associated with that other ability score. If you want to be more perceptive and aware, obviously things like perception and survival are really good. But if you wanted to possibly be able to bluff or talk your way out of a situation, like if you got caught sneaking in somewhere you shouldn't be, then charisma is definitely the way to go. That part's totally up to you, but again, for the video, they're placeholders at 10 each. Finally, for our background, anything can work because anything should work, but let's be honest, criminal or the variant of spy is probably the best for this. Looking at the actual class and level breakdown now, I already mentioned that level 10 is where everything comes together, but that doesn't mean that we have to wait until level 10 to actually feel like this character does what they're supposed to do. The level breakdown would be Artificer 7 and Rogue 3 by that point. And then, after that, you can just feel free to pick whichever of the two classes you want, or even grab a third one if you really feel like it. But really, probably just those two are all we really need. Also, you can feel free to bounce back and forth between the two classes, and I'd actually recommend doing that in order to feel like you're actually scaling in power. Maybe go up the first 3 levels into Artificer, and then jump over to Rogue for a level to pick up your expertise and really refine your skill set. Then jump back to Artificer until you pick up extra attack, because, spoiler, we're going to go Armorer, and that will give us extra attack. And then after that, you can jump back to Rogue for cunning action, you can jump back to Artificer for just a little bit more, finally back to Rogue 3 to grab our Rogue subclass, and then finish off at level 10 with Artificer 7 to grab Flash of Genius. So what do the two classes actually give us? Well, Artificer actually doesn't give us too much that we're super worried about. They will eventually end up giving us expertise in tools, so don't feel the need to pick up the expertise with Thieves' tools when you multi-class Rogue. We can instead focus on getting expertise in other skills and save the expertise in Thieves' tools until we get the 6th level tools expertise feature. Before that though, we'll obviously pick up Armorer as our subclass, and Armorer has quite a bit. They have arcane armor, which is really good for us since it lets us wear medium or heavy armor and not suffer really any major drawbacks from it. We suffer even less drawbacks if we make the infiltrator model of armor, which we're pretty much always going to want to have up. The infiltrator gets us our lightning launcher, which is a really nice ranged attack that pairs well with Rogue. We also get powered steps, so we just get a flat 5-foot speed increase. And we have dampening field, which gives us advantage on stealth checks and basically counteracts the disadvantage we would normally have if the armor has disadvantage on stealth checks. This could be important, and I'll talk about it later. Besides Flash of Genius at level 7, the only other thing Artificer really gives us are our infusions. And really, there's only one we definitely want, with a few others that we might want. In order to really get into places, we will want the Gloves of Thievery to make our tool skill checks as good as possible. But we're going to have at least 3 infusions total, possibly more if you continue up Artificer beyond level 10. And at that point, the other 2 are really up to you. I was going to recommend the Boots or Cloak of Elvenkind, but those don't really work too well, just given with how advantage and disadvantage and them canceling out thanks to our infiltrator model of armor all combos together. Also, for spells, we do want to make sure we pick up Spider Climb and Enhance Ability. We can use Spider Climb to get to where we want to break into, and then swap to Enhance Ability to actually break into the place. Though really, we might not actually need advantage if we're already rolling with a really high modifier. And now what does Rogue give us? Well, Rogue, of course, gives us expertise for our various skills, both stealth-based and also not stealth-based, like your wisdom skills or your charisma skills, depending on what you picked. And that's really going to be the crux of the build. We're not necessarily going for something that is a skill monkey meant to be good at a lot of skills, rather a skill monkey in terms of being an expert at what we do. But ideally, If there's ever a time where someone is needed to go scout out an area or break into some large fortified building, then we're definitely going to be the one for the job. We're also going to get sneak attack and cunning action from Rogue. Sneak attack is a nice little damage boost for us, given we're not making too many attacks around just yet. And cunning action is a good use of our bonus action if we feel the need to run away or try to hide in the middle of combat. And then that brings me to our subclass. Now obviously the request asked for an assassin, so realistically that's probably the option we want to go with. However, some other good options would be Thief, just for more of that infiltration type of theme. Thief is supposed to be the rogue that's good at breaking into places, so that fits well. Phantom Rogue would be pretty good purely for the pun of Ghost in the Machine, as well as the splash sneak attack damage. That could be a very nice mechanical combo for the build if you wanted that as well. But out of all of those options, do you want to know what I would do? Come here. I actually wouldn't do any of them. I would go Soul Knife. I would pick Soul Knife and reflavor it. Instead of being psionic in nature and related to one's soul, rather relate it to cybernetics and honestly just digitize everything that the subclass gives you. Instead of blades of psychic energy that we manifest, they are lasers or like hard light digital weapons that you might see in old 90s cartoons about the cyberverse. It can actually kind of fit thematically well, but mechanically it's really good too. It can turn us into more of a skirmisher, since we can use the Psy Blades as melee weapons if we need to, and we have our lightning launcher at range. Plus, if we're within 60 feet of an enemy, we can still use our lightning launcher for our first attack, and once we have multi-attack, we can use our second attack with our Psy Blade since they can be thrown. Then, because we've attacked with our Psy Blade, we'd get a bonus action with our offhand Psy Blade as well. Meaning that all of a sudden, we have very consistent damage with 3 attacks a turn, sneak attack, and if the lightning launcher hits, that can also deal some extra damage. So it's a pretty neat combat-oriented build if you wanted to do that. But if you wanted to still focus on skills, the Soul Knife can do that too. The one key feature we get is Psi Bolstered Knack, which allows us to expend psionic die in order to boost our skill checks. We can only use it on skill checks that we fail, so we're probably not using it on lockpicking, stealth, or anything else that is what we're meant to be really good at. But those secondary skills, the wisdom or the charisma, the things that aren't as good and we might not even have put expertise into, those are still fairly risky and could be subjected to failure. If we do fail a skill check, we could then use Psi Bolstered Knack to just add a flat die roll to that bonus. That's a little bit swingy, but it's also pretty beneficial. Finally, for feats, really this build is very straightforward. We only get 1 ability score improvement or feat between levels 1 and 10, and we're just dumping that into intelligence because that's our primary stat, with dexterity and con as our secondaries, and then wisdom or charisma as our very last important stat. As you continue up the build beyond level 10, any other ability score improvements or feats that you get can be totally up to you as to what they'll actually improve. We've also set ourselves up really nicely to get one at Artificer 8 and Rogue 4, aka levels 11 and 12, if you wanted to continue that route too. And other than that, that's pretty much the build. To summarize what we have, we are a good infiltrator. We are designed for stealth and scouting primarily, and we have a very high bonus to both of those skills, but we have an even higher bonus to lockpicking. If you wanted to be even stealthier, because of the way the stealth bonus works from dampening field from the infiltrator model that Armor Artificer gives you, what we could actually do instead of throwing on plate mail and just having the advantage and disadvantage cancel out, is we could grab Medium Armor Master. If you dedicated a feat to that and then picked up half plate, our AC would be roughly on par with regular plate mail, but on top of that, the disadvantage from stealth that we would get for wearing half plate armor is just removed thanks to the feat Medium Armor Master. Then, because dampening field just gives us flat advantage onto our stealth checks, we can actually benefit from that advantage. We are okay in combat, I would say. We're definitely more of a damage dealer than anything else at all, and depending on which subclass you picked, this can really vary. If you wanted a little bit more AoE, though not really AoE, it's just cleave damage, Phantom Rogue is actually a really good option. If you wanted to be really good at killing things before they get the chance to go, and surprising enemies, since we're trying to be really stealthy anyways, Assassin is a very good choice. Being really good at both damage and your various skills that you're trying to be good at anyways, then I personally think Soul Knife is the way to go. Not to mention the entire theme I've been glossing over, that we are also pretty much the Terminator as a robotic assassin. Besides that, let me know what you thought of the build, or what you would add or change to get closer to the theme of the cyborg assassin. Obviously, if we weren't restricted to Warforged, there might be a lot of other things we could do, but honestly, I like how thematic the build comes together as this entity that has been built and designed for one purpose and one purpose only, and we are very good at that purpose. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.